Welcome to the Behind Them Sticks podcast, brought to you by TSWS Gaming.
Come and talk to me, Lennard Ray.
That's
Come
your
on.
name.
Come and talk to me. I just wanna have a conversation. No, I'm not your type of baby. Listen, I'm just saying we can rule the world, just me and you. If you quit playing, won't you take the chance with me and have that conversation? I just wanna have that conversation with you. Come and talk to me. I just wanna have that conversation with you. Look, see we vibing and you know it's true. Baby, what it do? Do for me and I'ma do for you. No doubt about it, boo. See, I'm a Midwest king, looking for myself a queen. Ready to chase a dream with a dope self-esteem. You find it in all I know, and that's for real. You get to shaking that ass on the floor, and I see what's real. No disrespect, I just tell it like it is. Do you ever want some kids? What your ultimate goals? Maybe I can help with those. The mo was broke when he made you a blessing. You looking like a whole buffet, and I need some seconds. You say you had promiscuous ways, that was back in the day. I'll be alive, I say I did it. That shit was a phase. So baby, take this journey with me. You can pick the time and place, this nigga isn't picky. Smile on your face, I know the deal. Sign and deliver after seal. I can see it in her eyes, this one right here for real. I just wanna have a conversation. No, I'm not your type of baby, listen, I'm just saying. We can rule the world, just me and you, if you quit playing. Won't you take the chance with me and have that conversation? I just wanna have that conversation with you. Come and talk, yeah. I just wanna have that conversation with you. Lady, you so far ahead of these others, just like a ship on the horizon. Picking up on your vibe, signal stronger than Verizon. All the thoughts that I've been contemplating, ain't no time for faking or debating. You the one, ain't no mistaking. Look, I see you swag different. Always carry yourself like you ready, you on a mission. I had to know you, I'm tempted. I can see why you timid. Hold up now, baby, listen. Just take that dance with me. I can show you that there's a difference. I'm locked in. I throw away my player ways because you pop in. A shooter always shoot a shot. With you by my side, I guarantee we'll reach the top. I put that on God and them. I give you all that I got. So baby, take this journey with me. You can pick the time and place. This nigga isn't picky. Smile on your face, I know the deal. Sign and deliver after seal. I can see it in her eyes. This one right here for real. I just wanna have a conversation. No, I'm not your type of baby. Listen, I'm just saying. We can rule the world, just me and you, if you quit playing. Won't you take the chance with me and have that conversation? I just wanna have that conversation with you. Come and talk, yeah. I just wanna have that conversation with you. Come and talk to me.
All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another fantastic episode of Behind Them Sticks with your boy Ham Solo. I am doing this show today with a very special guest, Glenn at ID at Xbox. Brother, please announce yourself. Let everybody know who you are. I really appreciate you giving me some time to interview you and whatnot, and have a little bit of a talk with you.
Yeah, no, super happy to join. So my name is Glenn. I do the marketing for the ID at Xbox program over on Xbox. I guess, if people aren't familiar with ID at Xbox, it's kind of, it's our indie and digital games program. It originally started as a way for indie games to be able to publish on Xbox without going through the process that a big publisher would go through. And when it first started, that we were getting one game a month and a lot of small games that people had worked on. And now it's like a pretty huge program, like a very large percentage of the games that are published on Xbox now go through ID. And so we have everything from little tiny indies, made by one studio or one person in a studio up to like really big free to play games and that kind of stuff. So it's grown a ton.
But before we continue on, literally, I don't know what just happened, but for some reason, there's like some choppiness in your voice when you're talking a little bit. Maybe click mute and unmute yourself and see if that helps or whatnot. I'm gonna do the same on my end for you, because it might be.
How's that?
All right, speak now.
that any better?
Oh, no, no, but we'll just go on ahead and continue because it's not too bad. I can still understand what you're saying, and it sounds fine. Hopefully, whatever's going on just kind of works its way out.
Yeah, it's weird because you're completely clear to me, so I don't. Yeah, it's strange.
Yeah, really strange. But continuing on. So just let everybody know like what gaming and social media platforms that they can either find you at, maybe game with you, or maybe just chat about or figure out more about the ID at Xbox program.
Yeah, so I'm on Xbox Live as Triplizard, and I don't know why. I think like back in the day, I was trying to find a word that wasn't taken, your name that wasn't taken, so I pulled that out of the air. So anyway, I'm on most social media as Triplizard, so I'm on Twitter as that as well, and so if people want to hit me up on Twitter, sometimes I'm not great about seeing if I have a new message to accept, but I try and check for them pretty regularly. And they can always hit me up on Xbox Live.
Okay, that sounds good. Sounds good. So you go by Triplizard everywhere else.
Yeah, pretty much. Where I have one of those cool internet handles. That's the one I tend to use for whatever reason.
Gotcha. Is there any games that you're currently partaking in right now?
Right now, let's see. I know we were a bit late to the party on Fall Guys, but we just got that on Xbox, I think, last week or something, and so I've been playing quite a bit of that. It's pretty fun, especially like playing with the kids and that kind of stuff. Cuphead Delicious Last Course, which is their DLC, just launched today, which meant 9 o'clock last night for me on the West Coast here. So I got to check that one out, and I've been working with the Cuphead team since we first had them on stage at E3, like probably 10 years ago or whatever. Know those people really well. They're just great people, and love that game. So was super excited to jump into the DLC. And it's fantastic, by the way. If you like that kind of game, if you're into that style of gameplay, it's one of the all-time bests, I think. Super hard for me. I haven't finished it yet. I never got to the last boss on the original game, but the DLC is really fun.
Okay. Let's just pause real quick. I'm going to see if I can fix this by closing out this program and reopening it back up, because for some reason it is wild right now.
Okay, cool.
So everybody in the crowd, just give me just a moment. I'll be right back.
I was working from home, and I always had trouble with my video on it for some reason. But usually its max is pretty good.
Okay, sweet. We're back. We're back on, and you sound perfectly fine now. I just wanted to do right by my guests and not have my guests and my chat, obviously, to have the best experience that they can possible. So so thank you for being very, very helpful with that and patient. And thank you, thank you to the people in the chat as well for being patient with that. A little bit of a hiccup, but let's keep it moving. So so you were telling me before we got into the show, like we were chatting a little bit beforehand, that you had a few different things that you first started on when it came to gaming, correct?
Yeah.
So I want because I don't remember what the heck that thing was that you called it the first time. The only one I remembered was the original PlayStation, but you said something about another system as well. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so I was a kid back when the sort of first home computer era started happening, and I think a lot of people had Commodore 64s, and what were the other ones? I don't there were a whole bunch of a TRS-80 was another big one back then, and we had a computer called a TI with Texas Instruments 994A, which had all of 16 kilobytes of memory. And it had a thing that was really cool about it. It was different than a lot of the other PCs. Is that it actually had a cartridge slot, and the cartridge slot could be used for any kind of program. So there was like a think I remember there was a basic word processing type thing that you could slot in there. But also you could go out and buy games, just like you could buy, games for an Atari, 2600 or whatever at the time. So I remember buying these, or my dad bought these games like Munch Man, which was a Pac-Man ripoff, and there was TI Invaders, which was a Space Invaders ripoff, and um, but I don't remember all the other ones. There was one, there was a Donkey Kong ripoff with a rabbit. And anyway, that was my first kind of like home video gaming experience on something that was sort of like a console. And then I was kind of like, I missed most of the Nintendo era. It was kind of weird because I was living in Australia at the time, and I don't know I don't think Nintendo launched down there until much later because there were no Nintendos. And then when I moved back to the United States, I was kind of more, I got into like PCs and that kind of stuff until PlayStation came along, and then so my first actual home console was a PS1.
Wow. Wow. So so you were pretty like, what would you say? Would you say that you were just in like doing something else, or what would be your best like reason for not having a like at home console for so long? I mean, that's quite some time.
Yeah, it was just mostly because when I was gaming, I was doing PC stuff, like early PC stuff, like Quake. Well, I mean, I guess there was a period where I had an Atari 1040 ST was my first like actual computer that was my computer, and I did quite a bit of gaming on that. There were what was it, Dungeon Master? I think was one that I was really into, and a few other games. And then I got a PC, like an early PC. I don't remember a model or whatever after that, and I was playing stuff like the original Doom, and then a bunch of the Sierra games. I was really into those, like Sierra, like Gabriel Knight and King's Quest, and they had this thing called The Incredible Tune, which was like a puzzle game I was really into. And then I got into Sierra
games. You're talking about the developer and whatnot, right?
Yeah, the public.
Wow, that's old. Nice. That's some old games, right? They made some fantastic ones back in the day, for sure.
Oh yeah, I was a big fan. Like I for some reason I never played the LucasArts ones until much later, but I love the Sierra stuff. And then ironically or coincidentally or whatever, I ended up working for Sierra like 12 years after that. So
that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool to hear. It's different having somebody on the show that's really had like some background within like the companies and whatnot, which we'll kind of get into how you got into that here in a little bit. But I just kind of want to go down kind of like the list of the kind of things that made you more into a gamer more and more throughout the time. So you said you started out with PC pretty hard, and then you hopped over to PlayStation. What was some pretty cool, interesting games for you during that time?
When I first got the PlayStation, I really got into the social aspect of gaming, which the PC stuff was very solo, like, in your room with the door closed, that kind of stuff. And the PlayStation was like on the couch with your friends. And so I was playing Twisted Metal 2 was like the favorite one. Like friends would come over and we would just, do the whole hand off the controller thing. And then I think it had was it four player? I can't remember if it was 2-player or 4-player local co-op mode. And we just played the crap out of that. Like that was so much fun. Jump and Flash was one I remember I played a lot of, and then obviously, Crash Bandicoot. And then Final Fantasy came along, Final Fantasy 7. Oh my God, I remember that launch. That was like TV commercials were showing those cutscenes, and I was like, oh my God, I've never seen anything like that. And I never played an RPG, didn't really know what you did. Like I didn't understand the idea of leveling up your character. And every time I, got into a fight and used a bunch of my potions or whatever, I was like, damn it, and I'd restart, and then I didn't realize that was part of the whole game loop of trying to level up the character. But yeah, I had, I don't know, 200 hours or something, that thing, trying to get all of the final summons. What was it, Knights of the Round Table, I think was the last one that I finally got. So yeah.
Awesome. So that sums up kind of the time for you with your PlayStation, correct?
Yeah, that would have been, I don't know, when did the PlayStation get, like 95 or something like that? That was like my gaming from like 95 until, well, yeah, I mean, I started working in QA in 99 or 2000, something like that. And then it suddenly became kind of like a career thing. So I, went from having just the PlayStation 1 and just playing that to like, having other consoles. And then eventually the Xbox came along, and that became kind of my, yeah, I just kind of gravitated over there.
Gotcha. All right. So from the PlayStation, what was like the next step that you took when it came to gaming? Did you go back into the computer? Did you hop into the PlayStation
Yeah.
2, Xbox from there, or what happened?
Yeah, I became kind of more of a doing everything type gamer at that point, because I was working at Activision at the time on Return to Castle Wolfenstein, and then Jedi Outcast, Jedi Knight 2. And though I suddenly, like, I had played, I mentioned before, I played like the original Doom and that kind of stuff, but those games just blew me away, like what you could do with PC gaming again. So I, went down to whatever Egghead or whatever and got all the components and built myself a big gaming rig, massive thing with the Voodoo 2 cards chained together and all that kind of stuff. And I really got into PC gaming for a while, but I was still playing a lot of PlayStation 1 and then PlayStation 2 when it came along. Got really into like EverQuest and Warcraft, StarCraft, that kind of stuff. That became kind of my main focus for a long time.
Gotcha. Okay, so what was it like working at Activision back in that time?
Yeah, so I was in QA, and they have there's a lot of stuff these days about crunch and how QA is treated and all that kind of stuff, and very much like that was the experience there. I mean, no criticism of Activision or whatever. That's just kind of how the industry operated back then. But we were in the pit, like the basement of the big headquarters over there in Santa Monica, and we had like, we were treated like, we were all temps. We were all working for this temp agency. We had a special entrance to keep us out of the main part of the building, and
Wow.
we worked crazy hours, man. It was nuts. Like when we were getting to the end of a project, there were days where I would work from like 7 in the morning until 9 or 10 at night, 6 days a week. It's just kind of expected, and we were, but I was still relatively young back then. I didn't have a family. I'm not saying this is a good thing. I'm glad that the industry is evolving from that to like treating people like human beings nowadays. But there was a kind of a collegial aspect to it, with you're in there and a whole bunch of other people that are like all hardcore gamers, and you're just kind of you're crunching away on this these checklists and all this crap that you do in QA, and then you get in these big multiplayer sessions to kind of test out multiplayer functionality and what have you, and they turn into like these massive gaming sessions and go on for hours, and that was all. I mean, it was a lot of work. It was hard. It was didn't pay anything hardly, and but it was a lot of fun. And I went from like oh yeah, I'm playing a game to understanding how they're put together, how the engines work, how they build levels, like how they how multiplayer functionality is put together and that kind of stuff. So it was it was a really good kind of like hands-on deck, breathing from the fire hose kind of learning process.
Man, that's pretty freaking wild. I didn't know that it was like that so much back in the day. I mean, you hear things, but you never really know until you talk to somebody that's been there and had to go through that kind of stuff. So it's pretty wild that you have that experience behind your belt. Pretty nutty stuff.
It's one of those things. I think there are a lot of people in the industry who got their start through QA, and it's kind of like it's kind of like if you were in the military or something, you meet some other ex-military person, they've always got kind of their own special language, you kind of meet that with a lot of people in the game industry, where it's like, oh yeah, you were in QA. Oh yeah, me too. And you kind of, you get I was like, yeah, trial by fire, we made it, that kind of thing.
Got it. So after you got done like working there, was it the same generation of consoles that that were out, or was it going on to the next generation by the time that you decided to make your move?
So I was there right when the original Xbox launched. I was at that E3 where they had their first E3 presence, and that was pretty. The way they showed it off, like it just seemed like magical. It had a built-in hard drive, which was like whoa. And then they had this display where had all these ping pong balls flying around on this video that they're showing to show how much I don't remember how many something or other that they could push at the same time, polygons or whatever. So that was I was kind of working there when the Xbox launched, and I started working on Xbox a lot. So like worked on Tony Hawk 2X, which was the Tony Hawk 2 port to the Xbox. And then the GameCube was coming along. I remember seeing a prototype GameCube. I think I left Activision and went over to Sierra before the GameCube actually came out.
Okay, wow. So what was that cycle like? Did you end up like, well, like by that cycle, I mean like console generation, like did you move on to something new and exciting like after the GameCube and stuff like that launched? Where did you end up finding yourself, like, I guess more or less like in the terms of gaming?
Yeah.
Like what were you playing and stuff like that, more or less?
Yeah. So I was living in a big loft in LA with a couple of friends, and so we had a pretty big gaming rig setup. So we had an Xbox, PS2, and a GameCube all kind of happening at the same time there. And so we played. I played a lot of Xbox games. That became kind of my. Even I had the big old Duke controller and everything for whatever reason. I just kind of really gravitated towards that. But there was a lot of PS2 stuff going on still in our household. A lot of I don't remember if we played Grand Theft Auto there or if I played that at a friend's house, but that was certainly something that was happening a lot.
That game was really big.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of controversy behind that game too.
For sure.
Yeah, wild time. Because that game went from, being bird's eye view to being, you're right behind the player now, and you're literally doing whatever you want. And it felt, at the time, it felt so dang real. You hop in the car, you got your radio stations, you can change the radio stations to whatever kind of music that you wanted to listen to. You can get out of the car and commit some crimes. The police in that game were relentless.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember the first time I saw it, like I'd heard about it and stuff, but I hadn't played it. And I went over to a friend's house and he popped it in. And he wasn't doing any missions. He was just running around trying to get the star rating or whatever.
6 stars.
Yeah, trying to get the 6 stars to the point where the military would come after him. And I remember looking at him going like, can you do that? You can just go around and screw around and try and be more and more violent until you get, it's not, you don't have to go and do the mission. He's like, no, you don't have to do the mission if you don't want to. You just do this. I was like, wow, that's bizarre. Like it just seemed so strange, and obviously it was like really just tons of fun to just do that, even if you weren't playing through the main part of the game.
I think that was most people's introduction into that game, was just screwing around, not really doing missions at all. It's like, oh man, look how terrible I can be. And then someone's like, that's sick, I want to try it too.
Yeah.
And I remember cheat codes were like big back then.
Oh, yeah.
So you were getting all the guns, replenishing your health over and over and over. Getting that tank, turning the nozzle backwards and putting fly mode on and flying the tank all over the place. Like you could do some weird stuff in that game. And yeah, it was pretty nuts. It was definitely wild being so big to the point where, you were in an open world, but the next place that you went to had to load up a new open world for you each time that you crossed the bridges. That was pretty nuts.
Yeah, it was wild.
So
for another one, I remember the original Driver back then. That was that one kind of introduced a little bit of open. I can't remember if that was before or after Grand Theft Auto, but I remember that was the first game that I I bought and had at my house, where you had that kind of open world type experience.
Okay.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really good game too, as well. I mean, you're just in the car for the most part and doing missions and that. But I mean, I feel like, you know, games like Driver, what was another one? The Getaway, Grand Theft Auto, those really like opened up a lot of people's minds about like open world and just kind of screwing around and doing whatever you want to do and stuff like that. And then games like True Crime Streets of LA came out, Scarface came out. That was like a big game, and it was like they redid the movie to where he didn't die, and instead like you lost all your stuff because you know, they seized all your stuff and you had to get everything back and be the greatest guy all over again. And you got this weird thing after you killed people called balls. Like, you get more and more balls the more people you kill, I guess. So, whatever. Yeah. But I awesome. But they definitely Grand Theft Auto and a few other games definitely paved the way for a lot of open world and like I guess you could say like modern day type of games too, to where it feels like you're living in that similar society, even though it's way crazier.
Yeah. I think everything before that was level based. It was like, you know, you start here and you got to get to there. And there's walls and stuff on, you know, everything's clipped off. If you can't, you know, you got to go exactly that way. And, you know, they put things, they give you kind of like things to do while you're doing it. But, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, although there were other games, like I remember Jumpin' Flash, who had kind of open levels and, you know, Ape Escape and that kind of stuff. They were a little bit more kind of they weren't open world, but like the level design was more open. But
gotcha. So that generation obviously was very legendary. It was the birth of Xbox. PlayStation 2 made crazy sales with their console during that generation, coming off of the PlayStation 1. And then, you know, Nintendo was doing their thing, creating different type of experiences and whatnot, and also kind of, you know, attempting to make more like adult type of games and implementing it in there. Like, it was really cool seeing like the game, I'm not sure if you've heard of it or not, but like Eternal Darkness. That was a fantastic game back then. Seemed very Resident Evil-ish, but at the same time, it had nothing to do with Resident Evil.
Yeah.
So it was a really cool time in gaming. But as we progress forward to now the 360, PS3, Wii generation, did you start to... Did you have a direction of a console that you kind of favored a little bit more during that period? Like, because I mean, if we're keeping it real, everybody has their, you know, pride and joy, and then, you know, then you play the other ones if you're that kind of person.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I was definitely PS2 era. I was almost all about PS2, and then when the Xbox came out, started playing a lot of Halo, and then, you know, when Halo 2 came out and you could start playing online, that was like a game changer for me. So I kind of went, by the time that was happening, I went, you know, very much like mostly Xbox. And I work for Xbox. I'm not just saying that. I play other consoles too. So, but, you know, at that point I did kind of focus in on the Xbox and became, you know, really invested in that ecosystem. And then when the 360 came out, I was almost, you know, I still had a PlayStation, you know, still do, you know, obviously all the way through the generations, and loved Ratchet and Clank and, you know, other games that were kind of that era. But I was mostly on the 360. Like, I started, you know, downloading XBLA games when that started happening, and that seemed like a pretty cool, different kind of experience. And there were a lot of like really cool indie-ish type games that were coming through then. And and then I've kind of, you know, and then not too long after that, I ended up working at Xbox, and so I've just been all in on Xbox since then. You know?
Gotcha. And just by the way, chat, anybody that's out there listening, if you have any appropriate questions that you would maybe like me to ask, just make sure you throw that in the chat, and I will check it out and see what you got to say, and make sure it's cool, and then I'll ask it to him as necessary. But we do kind of have a limited show today, more or less because of me, because I gotta go pick up my daughter from daycare or preschool or whatever we want to call it now. But moving forward, So you said you got really big into like I guess you could say like Xbox Live scene, more or less, because that gives you the opportunity to really connect with people all over the place without having to leave your house. You don't have to go sit on their couch and play. You can literally just turn on your console, maybe shoot them a call or a text and be like, hey, I'm hopping online, you want to play? So what were some games other than Halo that were really big for you during that time of Xbox Live being big?
I would say like Halo 2 is the one I played mostly online, but there were a bunch of others that I was really like Crimson Skies. I was really into Cameo. I may be messing up the years here. No, I also should mention at the time I was also like big into World of Warcraft. Like when it first launched, I kind of stopped playing consoles for about a year because I was just all doing World of Warcraft. But yeah, in that sort of early 360 generation, a lot of XBLA games like Clone and Clyde and then Castle Crashers and all that kind of stuff. I think what else I played a lot back then. Yeah, I think a whole lot of Halo. Started to get into a little bit of driving games with Forza.
Did you get into Gears at all?
Yeah, I did actually. The first Gears. Yeah, that was played a lot of that one. I remember that came out. That looked radically different. It had this like really kind of compelling visual style. It was just really pretty amazing.
Really gritty.
Yeah, really gritty. Chronicles of Riddick, that was another one that really pushed the envelope.
I forget about that game. I completely forgot about that. With Vin Diesel on the cover.
Yeah.
Now we got him coming up in an Ark video game, which everyone trips out about. Vin Diesel's in a video game, and it's like, oh, it's not his first time exactly.
Yeah.
And being in a game, it's just really interesting to see him in this game. I'm a huge Ark fan. I have around 130 or 40 days worth of time in that game. So when I seen that Ark 2 was coming out and that there's going to be a story added to it, I was so happy because the last game, the last game, it was fantastic. It was fun. A lot of stuff you could do, but after you did enough things, it kind of felt like, all right, well, how do I get other friends to come and play? Because it's so hard to get them into a game where it's all about crafting, building stuff, and you have to craft the stuff to use. You can't just like pick up bullets somewhere or pick up foundations somewhere or something like that. You have to like literally craft everything, and you can get raided, and dinosaurs can destroy your bases and stuff like that. So like trying to get somebody else into that game without a story behind it to where they can kind of feel involved in it was really hard. So I feel like Ark 2 has a lot of opportunity to really get an even bigger player base, because they had a pretty good player base for quite some time. But
it's still huge. It's it's amazing how many people are still playing it.
Absolutely.
Did you start back in the preview?
Yes, I did. I bought it for $13. I bought it for $13 when it was in preview. And I was just like, oh my goodness. Like when I first got that game, I couldn't do it. Like I ran around for a little while and crafted a few things, didn't know what I was doing, and I gave up on the game, right? And then my wife, because she's somewhat of a gamer too, she was like, what's this game? And I was like, oh, it's Ark Survival Evolved. You pretty much do whatever you want, build whatever you want, and, tame whatever you want. And she's like, A few weeks go by, and I wake up at like 2:30 in the morning to use the restroom or something like that. And I notice that the TV's on, and I notice my wife's not in bed. I walk out to the front, and she's playing Ark. And she literally did that for like a month, and her excuse was I'm waking up and getting my brain mentally ready for work. And I was just like, whatever. That's a wild excuse. But she really enjoyed it, and it got me back into the train on it, and that's when I started to put in those crazy hours. It took me 18 hours, I want to say, to tame an Allosaurus on on an official server, and yeah, that was insane. But I was so proud of myself after I tamed that. But 18 hours is a little much.
Yeah, for one dinosaur, yeah.
For one dinosaur, that's not even that great because it got killed not very much longer after I had it. So I was very disappointed in all that because it didn't take long to kill it, but it took a long time to tame it.
Yeah.
But
That's awesome.
yeah, it was pretty awesome. And it was really cool to see my now wife back then when she was just my girlfriend. Like, I'm waking up in the middle of the night seeing her playing games. I'm like, I'm gonna get on one knee right now. It's about that time. But so we just got done talking about the 360 era. Now I'm gonna kind of push these two next generations kind of in one because we're barely really even into the new generation. Yeah. So tell me about like the experience that you had just with gaming, like you playing. Tell me what that was like during the transference from the 360 to the Xbox One, because a lot of people would say it's kind of a rough moment, a little bit more or less. You know, as the generation progressed, it just kind of felt like it was getting rougher and rougher and rougher. Because it launched, because to me, the Xbox One launched with some great games. Rise, Son of Rome, for instance, like I absolutely love that game. To this day, it still looks fantastic when you play it. If you're comparing it to other games that are out now and whatnot, it's just, to me, it holds up really well. Yeah, there was just several games that came out that I personally enjoyed at the beginning of the Xbox generation, but that's the further it kind of got, the more kind of out of touch that it felt. I want you to kind of give me your views on how you felt about that, or less, like, you know, what were you playing and what did you really enjoy at that time?
Yeah, so I was in first party at Microsoft at the time that we went from 360 to I kind of joined Microsoft 2008, so it was kind of just before, it was a little bit before the Kinect kind of era, and then I was there and by the way, there's this film series, documentary series called Xbox On that we put out a few months ago.
Yeah, it's an awesome series. I watched every single episode of that. It was fantastic. Oh, cool, yeah. So I'm very aware of that.
One thing I got to say about the whole team that put that together is they were painfully honest about how people internally were feeling at the Xbox One launch. So if anybody wants kind of the inside scoop and hasn't seen that, I recommend that. Like, having lived through that launch, watching the documentary, the episode on the Xbox One launch, I was like, oh wow, you know. But yeah, but you're right though. In spite of the kind of rocky stuff that went around there, there were some great games at that. Like Rise, Son of Rome was that was one that I was the marketing manager on that one, so I was very steeped in that whole thing for years. Worked very closely with Crytek and with our internal teams. I like that one a lot. Sunset Overdrive was another one I was a marketing manager on for a while. A friend of mine named Josh actually took it over and was the one who shipped it in the end. But Sunset Overdrive from Insomniac, which is now a Sony studio, that is easily one of my favorite Xbox One games. I think I maxed that out. I think 1,000 gamers scored it and completed everything you could do in that game. It was just so much fun. Just the mechanic of progressing around the city was really, really awesome. A ton of that. What else was going on back then? I think Fallout 3 was Xbox 360 era, so that was one I put in hundreds of hours into. But the other launch stuff around Xbox One, it was I played obviously all the first party games. I kind of checked them out, and then there was Titanfall, I think, was another big that came out about 6 months after the launch.
Titanfall was fantastic. Even without the campaign, I enjoyed the heck out of the multiplayer, running on walls and stuff like that. The big mechs that you can pull out, and it was just different. Compared to Call of Duty and Halo, where it felt like you were kind of the same guy. You felt like you were jumping around from the mech to yourself, and you had this, some would say almost OP, but like cloak that you could use. And I used to just run around with the shotgun and the cloak. People would call me a cheater all the time. But I'm just like, hey, they put it in the game. I'm not cheating. But that was fantastic. Yeah, continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I remember when first time I played Titanfall was at Gamescom before the Xbox One launched, and I remember people lining up to play it, and I was like, oh wow, this is a game changer, man. This is quite an experience. I loved it. I have a little bit of trouble with the verticality of it, and that's just if I'm not grounded, I just get a little disoriented. Like Tribes. If you ever played Tribes back in the day, like I had or even some of the like Quake 2. I had when you're kind of going up and down a lot, I get a little disoriented. But aside from that, like just calling in that mech, man, that was awesome. It's just a great experience.
So do you lose it playing Spider-Man?
I like Spider-Man to me has a similar kind of traversal to Sunset Overdrive. I mean, it's also Insomniac, but so I don't know what it is. Like I can follow that a bit more. There's something.
You think maybe it's because it's third person compared to first person? Because I know first person can kind of give you a lot to deal with at once because you're looking at everything compared to being in third person where you can kind of focus on your character to not really like let yourself get drug out by everything else that's around you.
Yeah, now that you say it like that, I think that's probably exactly it. Because I can handle third person where you're going up and down a lot. First person where you're not grounded, I get easier.
I can imagine how you'd feel playing like what's that game that came out recently, like in February, Dying Light 2, where it's first person and you go up really high on some of them things that you have to. Have you had a chance to try that game yet?
No, I haven't played it. I should check it out, but
yeah, you should, but be aware that like that might bother you because you're running really fast, especially when you're getting chased by enemies. And there's certain parts of the level. I even have somebody in the chat that I play games with regularly. Matt likes games. He was saying that he got on the edge of a building one time and he was like nervous as if he was on the edge of the building.
Oh wow!
Because just the height of that game, the way that it makes you feel like you're a couple steps from death because you can definitely walk off on accident.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine how you'd feel playing that. Yeah. He said in the chat right now, he said Dying Light 2 had my feet tingling. Like primal instincts kick in when you're on those heights. Like
yeah.
Awesome. It's pretty nuts. Yeah, it's pretty nuts that a video game can make you get that feeling. But continue on.
Oh yeah. So man, I'm just trying to think like what going back to that era. There was a bunch of great stuff over in the PlayStation. Resistance, I really liked that game a lot. They had a few games that I put a lot of time into. Uncharted, of course, and Last of Us. And then, I think a few years after that, maybe 2 years into the generation, I kind of made the switch from first party over to, I was doing the Xbox Entertainment Studio stuff for a while, and then I moved over to the ID Xbox program because I was starting to get into indie games. So once that kind of came out, there were just so many good games that I was sort of getting very vested in because I was working with the devs and all that kind of stuff. But there just there were so many that were so fantastic. Like you look at like Inside from Playdead. Their first game was Limbo. That game is just, in my opinion, is like it's not so much of a game. I mean, it's just like a work of art that you kind of experience your way through. Just incredible, and it actually is a work of art. It was accepted, I think, in the is it the Smithsonian, or maybe it's the Museum of Modern Art in New York or whatever. But anyway, there's one of the famous art galleries has a curated section of games now that they've started to feature as works of art in the museum, and Inside is one of like 2 or 3.
I didn't even know that. That's wild. So video games are getting that art respect now.
Yeah. It's certainly. I mean, it certainly makes sense. I mean, from my point of view, films obviously have that kind of treatment. They'll put Raging Bull or whatever in that curated collection, and then now that they're including, and something like Inside is it definitely makes that cut, because you look at how that game is put together, like the amount of care that has gone into the animation of the character, and there's so many different animations for what you do. If you jump or you fall or you get dragged into some water, whatever, like the animations are so distinct and so different. There are times where I've gone back and played that game just to like put a character, put the kid in situation, and then just do different things, get him killed in different ways, just to watch all the different animations that they've got for that one little area. And I'm like, my God, they just like put so much work into that game. Incredible. But
yeah, it's pretty nuts. That I just think it's wild that they're like in museums and stuff now, because I mean, not that I don't think that it deserves respect. It does, 100% does. People put their life's work into this kind of stuff. So it's exciting to see, but it's just like, wow, like we've come a long ways.
Oh yeah, a long way from people thinking video games are destroying kids' minds and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure there's still people who think that today. And
100%. I mean, we hear governments talking about video games and stuff like that, especially when something horrible happens. It feels like they have to blame it on something, except, anyways, I don't want to go down that route. But anyways, so moving from there, now we're at today's generation, right? And I want you to just kind of tell me like how you feel about this generation so far, and kind of maybe what some things are that you're expecting.
Yeah, I mean, so I think this generation is like super exciting. It's like I would say the reasons that I'm super excited about where gaming is going have a lot more to do with how the ecosystem and the industry has evolved, as opposed to like the hardware. Like, because I think when we went from the PlayStation 1 to the PlayStation 2 generation, that was a huge leap. And and then when you get into like PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 3 or Xbox, the original Xbox to Xbox 360, when you start going high def, and you saw like a radical difference in what games look like. This generation, we already had some 4K gaming with like the Series X and the PS Pro. Is that what it was? PS4 Pro. Last generation, and then you get into like what you can do now, and we're like 4K, 60 frames a second, even 120 frames a second, and I think that there's, for people who are probably much hardcore gamers than I am, who really feel that difference between the 30 frames a second, 60 frames a second, 120 frames a second, if they have the right hardware. I think that's fantastic. I know that some people like, that's a big deal, going from 1080 to 4K. For me, I definitely can feel it, but it's a kind of a marginal improvement compared to going from like standard def to high def as they did in previous generations. So, but I do think the way the hardware has kind of evolved, like I think it's on both PS5 and Xbox One. The load times are fantastic, so you just get right into the game. Like the Xbox Series X rather has the instant resume for, like, I forgot what it is, 5 or 6 different games, which is just a game changer in terms of how you do it. But I think that the things I'm most excited about as we kind of look at where the generation is going, I just think there's a lot of opportunities for developers and a lot of opportunities for gamers to kind of experience different things quickly and in different ways, which is really pretty cool. We have Game Pass, which is a fantastic service. Sony has theirs, which I haven't really played around with, but I think they just kind of had an update to it recently. And for me, those kind of services, and I know there's, people have different opinions about them, but like, from a gamer point of view, to be able to like, look at a game and say, what is, I don't know, Dicey Dungeons, which is a little puzzle game that launched a couple months ago, and just be able to go click, and play it without even installing it if you use the cloud gaming thing,
right?
And you just kind of jump in, and immediately you're like playing this game you maybe have never heard of, and then suddenly it's like, oh, this is really cool, I enjoy this, and that dev being able to reach all of those customers through that channel, I think is just it's a great kind of ecosystem for both sides. And then a lot of the stuff like the tools and the online services and that kind of stuff that are developing. I mean, you've seen a lot of the kind of democratization of gaming development that started back in the Xbox Live Arcade days, Xbox Live indie game type days, has really just taken off. The fact that the engines are so easy, I say that air quotes because obviously I don't do it myself, but compared to what it was back 20 years ago, it's night and day. And a lot of the other tools that are coming online are really making games, the developers can really focus all of the resources and all their effort on the games, as opposed to, building a new engine for, building one engine for PS3 because of the cell chip, building a different engine for, Xbox 360, and then having to work on your game in two completely different ecosystems. That kind of stuff is just changing day over day. But, and then also, the games I think we're getting into nowadays, they're going to get bigger. They're going to, as they kind of transition fully into the next gen, when the hardware becomes more available, I think you're going to, I'm pretty excited about these kind of, big, deep online experiences, that really prove out where we're going with this stuff.
Yeah, one game I'm really excited for to come out that I really can't wait to do some multiplayer gaming on is probably Redfall. Redfall looks amazing to me, and I really like the aspect of somebody using like a special move and your partner can use that move as well, or use a piece of the of their move. Like, you seen that one like woman, I think her name is like Layla, or I don't remember exactly all the names of the characters, but she like rose up something off of the ground, and then the other player ran up, jumped on top of it, and then did like an attack off of it. And I was just like, wow, like that really puts cooperation in a whole new kind of realm for me. I mean, there's been other games that's done stuff like that, but it's just really nice to see when somebody takes the time to implement something like that. So it's not so much of you feeling like you're doing your own thing and they're doing their own thing. You feel like you're like almost one team that's, maneuvering around everything, and it just feels really good.
Yeah, that one looked the trailer that was at our showcase earlier this month, man, that was amazing. I was just like, oh, I didn't know a whole lot about that game before we started watching that trailer, and I was just like, wow, this game looks like it's going to be awesome. Also, I'm also super excited for Starfield because I played a lot of Fallout, a lot of Skyrim, and I think it's Bethesda. So I don't know exactly how they're broken down, but I know it's Todd Howard and probably a lot of the people who worked on those games, and it's just kind of taking those kind of worlds and putting them into space. Just looks really interesting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go on ahead and continue on because we could talk about this kind of stuff all day, but I kind of want to know like what has kind of drawn you to getting into the industry per se? Like, so you said you started out, gaming as a PC and whatnot, but what was like that like turn to where you're like, I'm going in this direction because I really like this stuff? Was it just random, or is it something that you like planned out?
Yeah, I'm not one of these people who kind of sat there at like 12 and said I'm going to go work in the game industry, because I think when I was 12, I didn't even know what the game industry was. Like, I assumed it was like, programmers and they're, in these small cubicles in Silicon Valley, and that was it. I didn't realize that, what else there was beyond that. But I did, when I think it was when I started playing PS1 games with my friends, and we, I kind of got that magic of like, you play your level of Crash Bandicoot, give them the controller, and then they try and do it, and or playing in Twisted Metal 2, that kind of stuff. I thought, wow, this is really cool. This, I just really got into it, and there were a few story-driven games that were happening back then. They had like the FMV stuff, I'm just trying to remember what they were. There were a couple. There was a Johnny Mnemonic game, and some other ones where, and that whole stuff didn't really evolve that much. I mean, there's now some FMV games that are pretty good, but that genre kind of died back then.
Oh yeah,
But I,
Sega
yeah,
CD and oh
yeah,
yeah, Saturn. I mean, they had some really cool like movie moments, but the gameplay in those games were rough.
yeah. They couldn't Phantasmagoria, and there are a few others like they just. But but what I saw from that was like, oh, maybe you know, games aren't like Pac-Man or whatever. Like they can actually be these deep moving kind of story things, and so I had a friend who was working at Activision, and they hooked me up with an opportunity to go work in QA, and I thought, oh, let's try this out and see what it's like. And then when I kind of got in there and started experiencing the camaraderie of all the people who are doing it, I was like, oh, okay, this is what I want to do. And originally I tried to work my way up into the production side, and found that marketing was something that it was a little bit. I had an opportunity to get into the marketing side, so I went over there. That's where I've been ever since.
All right, so I'm just kind of curious, like, what's it like work? Because you said you worked in several different areas at Xbox, correct?
Yeah, so I worked in first party. So first party are the games that Microsoft makes, so Gears and
Right.
Forza and all that kind of stuff. That I did that for a while. My first game was this game called Lips. I don't know if you remember that, a singing game where it's shipped with a microphone. Um, and then there was a period right around 2000, right around the Xbox One launch. I think it's right around, a little bit before, where we had this thing called the Xbox Entertainment Studios, where we were making movies. So I was the marketing person up in Redmond who was kind of working with that whole team. And one cool experience I had from that was we made this movie called Atari Game Over. I don't know if you know this whole story about like the Atari made the ET game, and it was such a disaster. The game was so bad, it was such a disaster that they dumped thousands of them into this dump in the desert, and that's what brought down the whole company. That's at least the common lore of taking. So this film was where they actually went to the desert and found the dump where all these ET cartridges were supposedly dumped, and they dug it up and brought all that stuff out of the ground, and then interviewed a lot of people who were involved in the time, it's really a fascinating story if you haven't heard the whole story. But so I got to go, and I was at the dump when they dug it all up, and I met the guy who programmed the game, Howard Scott Warshaw, and then Nolan Bushnell, the guy who founded Atari. Got to meet him and got to actually pull the stuff out of the ground, which was pretty cool. And the guy who wrote Ready Player One was there, and I got to hang out with him for an evening. But anyway, so that was a short-lived thing. I was doing entertainment studio stuff for about 6 months, and then Microsoft kind of decided to move away from that whole area, and so I was looking for my next thing, and I heard Chris Charla, who's the guy who founded ID Xbox. I heard him talking about what his vision for ID Xbox was, and I thought, that sounds pretty interesting to me. So I moved over to the third party team, and third party is the team, we used to call it third party, now it has a different name. It's the team that manages external companies that are publishing on Xbox. So we have people who work with EA and Activision, and so I took over the management of the at the time was primarily indie game space, and yeah, I've been doing that for 7 years now.
Wow. So what's it like? Like, I mean, I'm assuming you're bumping elbows with all sorts of different type of people out there. What's like the day in the life of being you? Like, how busy are you on a consistent basis?
Yeah, I'm pretty busy. I mean, there was a period where I was the only one doing ID Xbox marketing, actually a long time, like probably 3 years. And then it came, went from one game a month to one game a week to 5 games a week to we're doing, I think, 700 games a year or something like that now. And
Lord.
We have some really huge games that require a lot of hand holding. So my team has gone from just me to now it's about 8 people. We have some people will handle just discounting, some people will handle small games, some people are dedicated to big publishers. But so what I do, I mean, the way we kind of divide things up amongst the team, and then I kind of figure out how it all puts together, and then I work on some of the strategic stuff, which is pretty cool. Like our showcase, I had a bunch of games in the showcase, and I kind of managed those through. But a lot of what I do is just communicating with partners, with publishers and developers, and talking to them about what they're doing and figuring out how we can create opportunities for them. If they have issues, trying to help sort that out for them. um, and that's actually kind of my favorite part of the job, because I've met a lot of the creators of these games that and it's like if you go and meet a filmmaker who made your favorite film, you're like, oh wow, and when I meet some of these people, like if a game is really something that I felt kind of strongly about, meeting the people who make it is really pretty cool. It's a good experience. And also, I think they're just a lot of people who are super grateful for the help that we're giving them, in a lot of cases. And sometimes, we screw things up and people are upset, and we have to deal with that, and and try not to do that often. But most of the time it's the opposite. We come to people and we're like, hey, you've got this thing going on, and we'd love to include you, and they're just like, oh my god, that's so awesome. So that aspect of it is really cool.
So do you guys, would you say you guys go out and look for people, or do they more or less come to you? Which one is it, or is it a lot of both?
It's a lot of both. In the early days, there was a whole lot of us going out and meeting people, and that's where Chris Charla was a great asset, because he kind of knew everybody in the indie game space back from the XBLA days. So he'd go out and find all the people he'd worked with before to bring them to the platform. Nowadays, people all kind of know who we are and how we operate, and so they generally come to us. But we go to all the shows have been kind of obviously quiet for the last couple of years, but we go out to all the shows when they're happening, and walk the floor and check out particularly the indie shows, to see what people might be working on that we're not familiar with. We have kind of an open door policy for developers or publishers, and they kind of contact us, and we'll set up meetings, and and they'll show us what they're working on, and we develop the relationship so that then when they're ready with their next game, they'll bring it to us and show it to us early. So I would say nowadays it's a whole lot of kind of working with teams that we've got relationships with and that kind of stuff, but we're always trying to find the new ones too, trying to find the next Cuphead,
Right.
That kind of thing.
That's pretty cool. That's absolutely cool. So let me move on to some other things that I'm kind of interested in knowing about you. So if there was, any moment within your history within gaming, what would you say would be like the most memorable one that really stuck out to you, and or that either made you frustrated or extremely excited for what you're doing?
Yeah, I remember looking at that. You sent me the questions in advance. I remember looking at that one going, I got to think about that one. And then I forgot about it. So I'd say there's a few that were really kind of, that really stood out. I'd say the Cuphead launch, I've mentioned Cuphead a few times. That was such so Cuphead was one of the games that we found the team early on when they were just kind of deciding whether they were even going to make this game or not, and we started working with them and started partnering with them so we could help them out, financially, but also marketing, that kind of stuff. So we got to know them really early. And then the way they make their game, I mean, they literally hand draw, like they made cartoons in the 20s. I mean, they're doing frames, and so the game took quite a long time to make, and then the DLC took 7 years as well. But
Wow.
but we kind of kept working with them all the way through that process. And then when the game was ready to launch, we had a launch party at Meltdown Comics down in LA, which was a really cool spot on Sunset Boulevard. I guess it's gone now, but comic shop there, and the whole team came out. It was really, they had a lot of people working remotely even before that was a thing, and so it was the first time some of the people in the team had ever met, and and kind of just watching the enthusiasm of people for that game was really cool. And then obviously the game's been just a monstrous success over the years, and having it happen to that team who are just wonderful, wonderful people, and having been able to watch that thing from the various early stages all the way through the process was really pretty cool, I think.
That's pretty sweet. So, like, here's another question. Here's a question I don't have on the list that I kind of want to ask you. What's it like nurturing a company and watching something that started out small become really large?
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. Like, just I mean, obviously like in the case of Cuphead, those people are super talented and super smart in how they managed everything. So we help them where they can, but like full credit to them for doing it themselves. But it's great. We've seen a lot of successes. Like Arc is one, for example, that you were talking about. Like we started talking with that team, Studio Wildcard, and Jesse, their founder, pretty early on, and I remember when that thing launched in early access on Steam. It was, I don't, like, back in the early days, early access, it was clunky. Like it was
really rough. It was hard.
Yeah.
And it took forever for anything to load.
Yeah. And there were aspects of it that just didn't work. I mean, it was like broken. It was early access, so it's supposed to not be perfect, but I was like, oh man, this isn't gonna work. This isn't gonna work. And then that game, I think it launched right around one of the Jurassic Park movies, and everybody was all excited about dinosaurs, and that thing just freaking took off, and I was like, oh my god, this game is huge. And then we got it on Xbox that December. I think it launched in early access in June or July or something, and we got it on Game Preview, which is our version of early access, in December. And December has historically been like, don't launch your game in December. And I was like, you guys. They launched it, and it just it was the same thing. It was pretty clunky on Xbox, probably even clunkier than it was on PC, because they didn't have the controls working. I remember like ran around and hit trees, but that thing took off, and that was really pretty cool to see that happening as well.
So yeah, because that is a small game that got massive, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
in looking at it and playing it, nothing about it is small, but you just like wouldn't have seen something like that coming, especially as a gamer like myself. I play a lot of different games, whether they're really big or really small, but like when I downloaded Arc and I was like, this is $13, like whatever. And then I got into it. I was like, how the hell is this $13? I mean, this is jank right now, but this world is so big. There's so much to do. There's so much community built into it. And then also, you could meet all different types of people and then jump from one server to another server to another server if you want to. And I just thought, I was like, man, like, I bought that for $13. Like, that's insane.
You talk about like a return on investment for like $1 per hour of entertainment. That's probably the best investment in your life.
Right? And yeah, I am not mad about that at all. And it made me learn a lot about my lady, like I said, in gaming and whatnot, because beforehand I was thinking, she was more of a retro like lover and didn't really care about, new stuff, Mario kind of person, somebody that might jump into like Sonic or something like that. But when I seen her playing something as deep as that game, I was like, I think y'all got something. I mean, if you guys are taking my wife away from the bedroom, y'all got something. But all right. So I see you're really proud about like Cuphead and stuff like that. Is there any other games that you would say that like were like massive that you were just like, round of applause for, that stuck out? Like, I'm sure there's a lot of games that you were really happy about, but was there any special moments other than Cuphead for you personally?
Yeah, I mean, PUBG is an interesting one. We started working with them pretty early, and I mean, they had success on PC before, before we got involved. But watching that one go from, oh yeah, I've heard about that game. What is Battle Royale? What does that mean? To like, being as huge as it was, that was pretty interesting. Um, I think of one that was like, there's a game called Shotgun Farmers, which is kind of a smaller game. Um, and that one, the dev worked really hard on building up a community, and I started talking to him back and forth on email. Still haven't met him in person, by the way, but we were talking back and forth on email, and I was like, "What is this game? Whatever." And then it launched on Xbox, and we gave it some support, and that thing shot up to #1 on the charts on Xbox. This is like a
Wow.
developer with like a team of, I think he had 2 or 3 people, and watching that thing Halo or whatever off the charts to to shoot up #1. I was like, oh my god, wow, So he's they that kind of came out of nowhere, and that was pretty cool to see. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's been a bunch over the years. Trying to think of another example. Um, Goat Simulator, when that launched on Xbox, wasn't sure what people were going to think about that, and that thing
The
just
new Goat Simulator trolled everybody.
yeah.
And yeah, everybody thought it was I forgot what, like they thought it was some killer game. I forgot what it was. Somebody in the chat remind me.
Dead Island.
Yeah, Dead Island. Everybody thought it was Dead Island, and
Yeah.
you see the goat messing up everything in the background, but you don't think about it
Yeah.
until the goat comes up and like hits the person, and then it says Goat Simulator 3, and then everybody was like, there was a 2? Genius. That was freaking genius.
Several layers of trolling in that one trailer.
Right, fantastic.
The 2 is awesome.
How do you yourself maneuver knowing what to like is it your say whether something goes on to Game Pass or not from ID at Xbox, or is that a decision made by somebody else?
It's ultimately the Game Pass team's decision, but we all work pretty closely together. In fact, the Game Pass team, they're functionally the Game Pass planning team is functionally the same team as our team now. So we have a portfolio team, which are the people who kind of, it's their job to be, to play every game. Like literally they boot up every game that gets submitted for Xbox and play it, check it out. And so they will look at it. The marketing team, so myself and my counterparts will look at it. The Game Pass team will look at it, and then biz dev will be involved as well. And everybody has kind of an input. Portfolio, I think, has the ultimate say, and it's like, is this game the right kind of quality? And then there's a lot of factors that Game Pass, I think, is looking at, which is, do we have any games for kids? Are we missing puzzle games? Do we need more horror games? That kind of, so there's a lot of that kind of stuff. And then and then just timing and stuff. So there's a lot of different people who kind of ultimately get a say in it, and then obviously Game Pass has the ultimate final say.
Gotcha. All right, so I want you to tell me like the last 3 games that you really enjoyed, like the past like year and a half, or actually let's just say since this generation started. What are your 3 most most fun games to you as of right now?
Yeah. So the Stanley Parable is a game that's been out for, I think, 10 years, old game or something like that. And I had never played it. And then they did the Ultimate Edition that included all of the content from the various 10 years. And it came out on Xbox, I think, about 2 months ago. And I just like, I was so blown away by how great that game is. It's like I was laughing out loud, and just just totally got sucked into it. Even though again, late to the party, like people were playing that game 10 years ago, but the new version is done really well. The Xbox port is really good, and just the humor and design of that game is just awesome. Some people may hate it. I absolutely loved it. That's one. I think. What else have I played this generation? I really liked. Uh, the Medium from Bloober Team. That one was a really interesting game.
Yeah, that was fun.
Um, yeah, it's pretty dark, especially the ending. I know there's some controversy around it, but the Bloober Team, they're out of Poland. They're just a super talented team, and they were doing some really interesting things that the way they rendered the two worlds is kind of interesting. If you're not really paying a lot of attention, you think, oh, it's just like split screen, right? But it's really like they were rendering two completely different game worlds that were running simultaneously, which is why it was only on the current gen series gen. What's another one I played this generation that I really blown away by? Let's see. There's a little tiny game called Unpacking. I don't know if you heard of that one.
I played that game, yeah.
Yeah.
You're like unpacking boxes everywhere. And
yeah. It's the silliest concept for a game, but the thing that I really liked about that game is the way they told the story through how you unpack stuff. And you got this really deep story, but there's no dialogue or anything. It's just like, one example is like there's one room after the main character breaks up with their I can't remember girlfriend, I think it was girlfriend. After they break up, and the character returns back to their parents' home, pull a picture out, and it's a picture of the couple together, and you're like, okay, I'll just gonna put that on the bedside, right? It's where you put a picture, and it wouldn't let me do that. And I was like, what's going on? And I was like, put it everywhere, and then finally I figured out that you had to put it in a drawer face down. That was the only place you could put it away. I was like, oh, it was not a nice breakup. I get it. Okay.
Yeah, he's disappointed.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, that's fantastic. So we nailed that one pretty good. So I know that you have quite a past of playing video games and whatnot. I'm kind of curious, like, what would be two games that you would revive and bring back that you really enjoyed in the past and whatnot? Go on ahead.
Simpsons Hit and Run and Metal Arms.
Metal Arms. Tell me a little bit about that, because I don't know.
Yeah, Metal Arms, God, it's one of the greatest games that like nobody's played. Like it came out in, I want to say 2003 or something. It was on the original Xbox. I think there was also a PS2 version of it. And it's kind of a little Ratchet and Clanky kind of game where you play as a robot, and it's a first person shooter, and it's so freaking good. Like every level in the game was so well designed, and the balance was perfect, and the variety of weapons was really good. And I was working at Sierra at the time when it came out, and Sierra released it, and for whatever reason they didn't do any marketing for it, and it just kind of. But it's got its fans, man. If you look on Twitter, if you search for it on Twitter, people are still out there like talking about it and trying to get get them to revive it. And it's kind of interesting because the dev studio behind it was a company called Swing and Ape, and they were right after the game came out. They were bought by Blizzard, who then put them on StarCraft Ghost, which was supposed to be the first-person shooter set in StarCraft world. And then, for whatever reason, that game got canceled, and then the team worked itself into various other parts of Blizzard, and they were involved in a lot of other big games that Blizzard put out later, Overwatch and that kind of stuff. They're kind of became core developers there. But that game, unfortunately I don't think it even made backwards compatibility, but because it's just a fantastic game. Then Simpsons Hit and Run, probably it's from Radical, and I just that was just talking about like the Grand Theft Auto things. That was Simpson Grand Theft Auto.
Right.
And it was just like, had all the humor. It was like really funny, and just exploring that world in 3D, being able to kind of go over to the donut shop and what have you. And, the missions were all fun. And it was just like really fun gaming experience. Like I just enjoyed every second of it.
Yeah, it was goofy. Some of the cars that you could drive were insane.
Yeah.
So, and the physics of the game were funny. It was just a well pieced together game that didn't take it itself too serious, I feel like.
Yeah, yeah, that whole Grand Theft Auto kind of type gameplay, but set in that world is just genius. Like, I had at one point when I was at Sierra, I pitched the idea of doing Crash Theft Auto, where you basically took the Simpsons hit and run engine and put the Crash Bandicoot, IP on top of it. But
that's a freaking pretty brilliant idea, actually.
I wish they'd done it. They went off and did what was it, Crash of the Titans instead, the Team of Radical, that was cool. That was a good game too. But yeah, I like my idea better.
Fair enough. All right, so what would be a couple of really exciting games that you're looking forward to that are coming?
Yeah, there's this game called High in Life from Squanch, which is Justin Roiland, who created Rick and Morty. It's his gaming company, and it's coming out, I think, soon, like maybe October, something like that. And we had a trailer for it at our summer showcase, and it just, the humor and the visuals of that just look so interesting to me. And but then if you kind of double click into the trailer bit and look at the variety of weapons, how they have the different guns, the guns talk to you and they each have their different voice. I'm pretty hopeful that one's going to be a lot of fun. And let's see, that one really stuck out to me. There's a I don't know if you're familiar with the game Atomic Heart, which yeah, it looks like a kind of a new, like if BioShock was being remade with today's technology or something like that, it looks really interesting, the stuff I've seen on that game. I don't know when it's coming out. I think they've announced ... ER sometime this year, which could be anywhere between September and December, I guess. Yeah, that one I'm really excited about. I can totally see myself dumping 100 hours into that one. Stalker 2 is another one. Yeah, those are probably the then outside of the indie game space, I'm super excited to see where Fable ends up going. I'm a huge Fable fan.
It's on my screen right now playing. That's hilarious.
Awesome. And I really like that the first party is relatively separate from us these days. So what I've seen in Fable is literally the same trailer with the frog eating the fairy that everybody else saw. So I don't know anything. I don't know much inside information about it, but I'm super excited for that one. Hellblade 2, super excited for that as well. The first one was really stunning.
I haven't heard you bring up Starfield at all. I'm surprised.
Oh, I mentioned it earlier. Yeah, that is definitely one I'm going to be. Yeah, that's definitely near the top of my list as well, for sure. I'm going to be pumping a lot of hours in that one. I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like a game that will be a time crusher, for sure. Yeah. Especially with all those planets that they're talking about having. I know some people thought it was silly that it was 1,000 planets, but I was on the opposite end. I was just like, it looks like I'm just going to be doing some adventure, and I don't know what's going to be going on, but I'm going to be all over the freaking place. Yeah. I wonder if I'm going to have to refuel my ship, because I'm going to end up spending a lot of money on fuel.
Yeah. It was like Fallout 3, man. I put so many hours into Fallout 3, and once I got into that game, I wanted to explore. Explored every inch of that map, went to every single location on there, and Starfield, I think, has got that times 1,000. So it'll be interesting to see.
Literally, yeah. So here's kind of a serious question that I ask everybody on the show. If there was anything about gaming that frustrates you personally, what would you say it is?
Yeah, toxicity in the community, for sure. And it's I think most gamers and most of the ones that I meet and talk to are just awesome people, and they're having fun, and they're all about just kind of what games do they like and playing with other people. But sometimes you see a game that maybe it includes a diverse character of some kind, and then you get these people who get on the reviews and they're trolling and that kind of stuff, and you're like, why you got to do that? It's just because you don't see it just there's some of that I just wish it wasn't in the community, and again, it's 1%, half of 1% or something like that. But
Right.
and a lot of people, they get they get really wrapped up in the console wars and stuff like that, and they're just you go on, I follow a lot of gamers, a lot of content creators, that kind of stuff on Twitter, and sometimes you click on something they say, and people in there like saying like, oh, everybody who works at Xbox and morons, that kind of stuff, and I'm just like, dude, like we're actual people, just for the record,
Right.
and
The disrespect is insane.
Yeah, and it's and it's funny, they think that we've got this like war thing going on with PlayStation. I always think that's really hysterical, because I'm like, I got like 20 friends who work at PlayStation. Like, there are a lot of people at PlayStation who used to work at Xbox, a lot of people at Xbox who used to work at PlayStation, and we're like, like Greg Rice is they're like a guy who handles their indie games there. He used to work at Double Fine, and like when I see him at shows and all that, I walk up and give him a hug. He's a good friend. Like they're it's like we're all, it's a really small industry. Like, everybody moves around, everybody knows each other. Like, nobody inside the industry is playing that kind of like console war stuff. We're all like, if there's a good PlayStation game, we're all like running out to buy it the first day.
Right. I actually thought it was hilarious, because I think it was yesterday, Corey Barlog, from God of War squad.
Yeah.
Somebody had said something about Starfield versus God of War, and like it must have like got under his skin a little bit, because he said something on Twitter saying like, oh, I can't wait for that game to come out, Starfield. I'm taking days off of work to play that game. And,
yeah.
And it was just so fantastic, because it shows that, hey, these guys, although they work on totally different companies, the bottom line is gaming.
Yeah,
that's what they're there to do. That's what they make some games, yeah, sure, but at the end of the day, they want to go home and have a dope experience just like anybody else. So if you're limiting yourself to one platform, or just to think one's superior over the other, you're actually just losing out on awesome video game moments that you could be having for yourself. And to me, I feel like you're taking growth away from yourself by being so rude and disgusting.
Yeah, and I get that not everybody can afford both systems, and and sometimes people kind of lean into the one that they bought. There's a little bit of tribalism, and that's as long as it's like fun, and it's like, oh, that's kind of my thing or whatever. That's cool. It's when it gets mean and and threatening and dark and stuff. That's when it's like, guys, it's not that.
Yeah, I mean, I compare it a lot to sports, because you got your regular fans, you have your people that follow really closely, and then you have the absolute like wild fanatics that will literally say anything just to have some people say something back, whether it's good or bad. But anyways, let me move to something a little bit more positive. What would be like a dream come true for you within gaming?
That's a great question. I think right now there's a bit of I think gaming is probably much broader than it ever has been. It's obviously has, in terms of where it's developed, and but there is a little bit of a thing where some people are gamers and some people aren't, and some of the accessibility options, or the being able to kind of like jump in and play a game stuff, still a little bit difficult for a lot of people. And I think I'd love to see it get to the point where it's just so immediate, for anybody who's got any kind of accessibility or something like that, where it's just something that like literally anybody can do, and it's not seen as like you're either a gamer or you're not a gamer. It's like, I want to have this experience, and then everybody can kind of have the experience. So I guess a bad analogy, if I can just push it, is like the movies, right? Like, nobody thinks of themselves as a moviegoer. It's like, you want to go and see Top Gun, or you want to go and see whatever whatever movie. Like, you just go and see the movie, right? It's not a thing. It's not like a thing that you have to commit to and distance yourself from other people. you know, and so I think ideally, like I like the idea of like gaming being kind of more, and it's very close to that point right now, but I think it's I think, you know, everybody being able to kind of like enjoy and experience it on the same kind of level. It's interesting because like when I first started gaming, I don't think anybody over the age of like 20, 25 was playing games. You know,
Right.
and there are now lots of people in their 50s and 60s who are playing games, and that's pretty cool. You know.
Yeah, it was very unpopular to be
Yeah.
known to be a gamer back in those times.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, not that long ago, like 20, 25 years ago, just in the 90s alone.
Yeah.
Like you weren't bragging about playing Pokemon at school and stuff like that. You were hiding that and then going on and playing it quietly without anybody really knowing, and you weren't wearing these, you know, t-shirts to support like, you know, like Pokemon and like Dragon Ball Z and stuff like that. You were getting ridiculed if you were out there doing that. But now you got, you know, like you just said, like people in their 40s, 50s, 60s that got like Hunter x Hunter shirts on and Naruto, and you know, you'll see them at gaming conventions and stuff like that. Stuff that you wouldn't really imagine at all. As early as, you know, even the early 2000s, to be honest.
Yeah,
you know,
still...
I feel like in the early 2000s is when people started to actually come out to be honest about, hey, I'm a gamer and I support it and I love it, especially when games got big like Call of Duty and Halo, where it was, especially with the whole like Xbox Live thing and you know, PlayStation Network and being able to talk to people from one place to another. It just brought people more understanding, and you start to learn that, you know, the person that you never would have thought is a gamer is maybe even a bigger gamer than you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty crazy times. All right, well, I'm wrapping it up because it's getting kind of late for me. I have to go get my daughter and whatnot. But if I were to ask you to describe gaming at all in just 3 words, what would those words be?
Immersive fun experiences.
Immersive fun experiences. You put that right together. Really nice, really nice. Glenn, it was my pleasure having you on the show. I really appreciate you, you know, setting some time aside for me in the middle of the day to knock out a show. I'm sure you got some stuff that you need to do to end out the day. But one more time, just let everybody know where they can, you know, find you or how they could possibly get into the ID at Xbox.
Yeah. So if they want to, I'm on Twitter at Triplizard. And then if they're interested in ID at Xbox program, just go to xbox.com/ID Xbox. It's just ID Xbox. It's either ID Xbox or IDAT Xbox. I usually go ID Xbox because otherwise it sounds like IDAT Xbox. But anyway, try one or the other or just search for it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, chat. Thank you, Glenn. Everybody that is here today, showing up, watching the show. I appreciate you. I have a second show going on later this evening, another Behind Them Sticks episode with Hustle and Motivate. It will be really fun. He tends to be on the Iron Lords podcast quite a bit. Another really good person in the community that doesn't really care what you play or how you play, and that's the kind of people that I like to interview, is just people that are gamers and enjoy this this activity that I thoroughly partake in, what seems to be every day. But you guys have a wonderful day out there. Glenn, you have a wonderful day as well, and we will talk to you guys in a few hours. See you later. Welcome to the Behind Them Sticks podcast, brought to you by TSWS Gaming.
Come and talk to me, Lennard Ray. That's your name. Come and talk to me. I just wanna have a conversation. No, I'm not your type, but baby, listen, I'm just saying. We can rule the world, just me and you, if you quit playing. Won't you take a chance with me and have that